From the 9th to th. The Chola Empire, which arose in the 9th century, brought under its control a large part of the peninsula. The Cholas developed a powerful navy, which enabled them to develop India's sea trade in the Indian Ocean and to conquer Sri Lanka and the Maldive Islands. Their influence was felt even in the countries of Southeast Asia. The Chola Empire may be said to mark a climax in South Indian history. The rise of the Chola Empire. The founder of the Chola Empire was Vijayalaya, who was at first a feudatory of the Pallavas. He captured Tanjore in 850. By the end of the 9th century, the Cholas had defeated both the Pallavas of Kankai and weakened the Pandyas, bringing the southern Tamil country, Tontamandala, under their control. But the Cholas were hard put to defend their position against the Rashtrakutas. As we have noted in a previous chapter, Krishna III defeated the Chola king and annexed the northern part of the Chola Empire. This was a serious setback to the Cholas, but they rapidly recovered, particularly after the death of Krishna III in 965 and the downfall of the Rashtrakuta Empire. Age of Rajaraja and Rajendra I. The greatest Chola rulers were Rajaraja, 985-1014, and his son Rajendra I, 1014 to 1044. P. D. 1009 for Empire. He 12th century. Rajaraja had been appointed heir apparent in his father's lifetime and had extensive experience of administration and warfare before his ax's scion to the throne. Rajaraja destroyed the Chera navy at Trivandrum and attacked Ceylon. He then conquered Madurai and captured the Pandyan king. He also invaded Sri Lanka and annexed its northern part to his empire. These moves were partly motivated by his desire to bring the trade with the Southeast Asian cone tries under his control. The Coromandel coast and Malabar were the centers for India's trade with the countries of Southeast Asia. One of his naval exploits was the conquest of the Maldive Islands. In the north, Rajaraja annexed the northwest-earned parts of the Gonga region in northwest Karnataka and overran Vengi. Rajendra I carried forward the annexationist policy of Rajaraja by completely overrunning the Pandya and Chera countries and including them in his empire. The conquest of Sri Lanka was also completed, with the crown and royal insignia of the king and the queen of Sri Lanka being captured in a battle. Sri Lanka was not able to free herself from the Chola control for another 50 ekars. Rajaraja and Rajendra I marked their victories by erecting a number of Shiva and Vishnu temples at various places. The most famous of these was the Rajarajeshwara temple at Tanjore. 1009. The Chola Empire, which was completed in 1010. The Chola rulers adopted the practice of having long inscriptions written on the walls of these temples, giving a historical narrative of their victories. That is why we know a great deal more about the Cholas than their predecessors. One of the most remarkable exploits in the reign of Rajendra I was the march across Kalinga to Bengal, in which the Chola armies crossed the Ganga and defeated two local kings. This expedition, which was led by a Chola general, took place in 1022 and followed the same route which the great conqueror Samudragupta had followed. To commemorate this occasion, Rajendra I assumed the title of Gangakondakla, or the Chola conqueror of Ganga. He built the new capital near the mouth of the Kaveri and called it Gangakondakolapuram, or the city of the Chola conqueror of the Ganga. An even more remarkable exploit in the time of Rajendra I was the naval expedition against the revived Srivijaya Empire. The Srivijaya Empire, which had been revived in the 10th century, extended over the Malay Peninsula, Sumatra, Java and the neighboring islands and controlled the overseas trade route to China. The rulers of the Sailendra dynasty were Buddhists and had cordial relations with the Cholas. The Sailendra ruler had built a Buddhist monastery at Nagapadam, and at his instance, Rajendra I had endowed a village for its upkeep. The cause of the breach between the two apparently was the Chola eagerness to remove obstacles to Indian traders and to expand Chola trade with China. The expedition led to the conquest of Kardaram or Kedah and a number of other places in the Malay Peninsula and Sumatra. The Chola navy was the strongest in the area for some time, and the Bay of Bengal was converted into a Chola lake. The Chola rulers also sent a number of embassies to China. A Chola embassy of 70 merchants. 1010. 17. Reached China in 1077 and, according to a Chinese account, received 81,800 strings of copper cash, that is, more than 4 lakhs of rupees in return for the articles of tribute compressing glassware, camphor, brocades, rhinoceros horns, ivory, etc. Tribute was the word used by the Chinese for all articles brought for trade. The Chola rulers fought constantly with the Chalukyas, who had succeeded the Rashtrakutas. These are called the later Chalukyas and their capital was at Kalyani. The Cholas and the later Chalukyas clashed for the overlordship of Vengi, Rayalaseema, the Tungabhadra Doab, and the Ganga country in northwest Karnataka. Neither side was able to gain a decisive victory in this contest, and ultimately it exhausted both the empires. It also appears that the wars were becoming harsher during this time. The Chola rulers sacked and plundered Chalukyan cities including Kalyani, and massacred the people, including Brahmanas and children. They adopted a similar policy in the Pandya country, settling military colonies to overawe the population. They destroyed Anuradhapa, the ancient capital of the rulers of Sri Lanka, and treated their king and queen harshly. These are blots in the history of the Chola Empire. However, once they had conquered a country, the Cholas tried to set up a sound system of administration in it. One of the remarkable features of the Chola administration was their encouragement to local self-government in the villages, all over their empire. The Chola Empire continued in a flourishing condition during the 12th century. But it declined during the early part of the 13th century. The later Chalukyan Empire in the Maharashtra area had also come to an end during the 12th century. The place of the Cholas was taken by the Pandyas and the Hoysalas in the south, and of the later Chalukyas by the Yadavas and the Kakatiyas. These states extended patronage to arts and architecture. 1011. 18. Unfortunately, they weakened themselves by continually fighting against each other, sacking the towns, and not even sparing the temples. Ultimately, they were destroyed by the sultans of Delhi in the beginning of the 14th century. Chola government. The king was the most important person in the Chola administration. All authority rested in his hands, but he had a council of ministers to advise him. The kings often went on tours in order to keep better touch with the administration. The Cholas maintained a large army consisting of elephants, cavalry and infantry, which were called the 3 limbs of the army. The infantry was generally armed with spears. Most of the kings had bodyguards, who were sworn to defend the kings even at the cost of their lives. The Venetian traveller, Marco Polo, who visited Kerala in the 13th century, says that all the soldiers in the bodyguard burnt themselves in the funeral pyre of the monarch when he died, a statement which may well be an exaggeration. The Cholas also had a strong navy, as we have seen, which dominated the Malabar and Coromandel coast and for some time, the entire Bay of Bengal. The Chola Empire was divided into mandolams or provinces, and these, in turn, were divided into Valanadu and Nadu. Sometimes, princes of the royal family were appointed governors of provinces. Officials were generally paid by giving them assignments of revenue-bearing lands. The Chola rulers built a network of royal roads, which were useful for trade, as well as for the movement of the army. Trade and commerce flourished in the Chola Empire, and there were some gigantic trade guilds, which traded with Java and Sumatra. The Cholas also paid attention to irrigation. The river Kaveri and other rivers were used for 1011. Medieval India. The purpose. Many tanks for irrigation were built. Some of the Chota rulers carried out an elaborate survey of land in order to fix the government's share of the land revenue. We do not know what precisely the government's share was. In addition to land tax, the Chola rulers drew their income from tolls on trade, taxes on profs, science, and also from the plunder of the neighboring territories. The Chola rulers were wealthy and could afford to build a number of towns and magnificent monuments. We have already referred to local self-govern. Meant in the villages in some areas in the Rash. Trakuta Empire. We know more about village government in the Chola Empire from a number of inscriptions. We hear of two assemblies, called the Yor and the Sabha or Mahasabha. The Yor was a general assembly of the village. However, we know more about the working of the Mahasabha. This was a gathering of the adult men in the Brahmana villages, which were called agraharas. These were villages settled by the Brahmanas, in which most of the land was rent-free. These villages enjoyed a large measure of autonomy. The affairs of the village were managed by an executive committee to which educated persons owning property were elected either by drawing lots or by rotation. These members had to retire every 3 years. There were other committees for helping in the assessment and collection of land revenue for maintenance of law and order, justice, etc. One of the important committees was the Tank Committee, which looked after the distribution of water to the fields. The Mahasabha could settle new lands and exercise ownership rights over them. It could also raise loans for the village and levy taxes. The self-government enjoyed by these Chola villages was a very fine system. To some extent this system worked in the other villages as well. However, the growth of feudalism, which is dis. 1011. The Chola Empire, covered in a later chapter, tended to restrict their autonomy. Cultural life. The extent and resources of the Chola Empire enabled the rulers to build great capitals, such as Tanjore, Ganga-Kondakolappuram, Kankai, etc. The rulers maintained large households and large palaces with banquet halls, spacious gardens and terraces. Thus, we learn of 7 or 5-storied houses for their chiefs. Unfortunately, none of the palaces of the period have survived. The Chola capital Ganga-Kondakolappuram is now just a small village near Tanjore. However, descriptions of the magnificent palaces of the rulers and their ministers, and of equally magnificent houses in which the wealthy merchants lived, are to be found in the literature of the period. 1012. 19. Temple architecture in the south attained its climax under the Cholas. The style of architecture, which came into vogue during this period, is called Dravida, because it was confined largely to South India. The main feature of this style was the building of story upon story above the chief deity room, Garbhagriha. The number of stories varied from 5 to 7, and they had a typical style, which came to be called the Vimana. A pillared hall called Mandap, with elaborately carved pillars and a flat roof, was generally placed in front of the sanctum. It acted as an audience hall, and was a place for various other activities, such as ceremonial dances, which were performed by the devotees, the women dedicate to the service of the gods. Sometimes, a passage used to be added around the sanctum so that the devotees could go round it. Images of 1012. 20. Many other gods could be put in this passage. This entire structure was enclosed in a courtyard surrounded by high walls, which were pierced by lofty gates called gopurams. In course of time, the Vimanas rose higher and higher, the number of courtyards were increased to 2 or 3, and the gopurams also became more and more elaborate. Thus, temple became a miniature city or palace, living rooms for priests and many others being provided in it. The temples generally enjoyed revenue-free grants of lands of their expenses. They also received grants and rich donor tie-ins from the wealthy merchants. Some of the temples became so rich that they entered business, lent money, and took part in business enterprises. 1013. Medieval India. An early example of the Dravida style of temple architecture is the 8th century temple of Kalasanata at Kanchipuram. One of the finest and most elaborate examples of the style is, however, provided by the Brihadaswara temple at Tanjore built by Rajaraja I. This is also called the Rajaraja temple because the Cholas were in the habit of installing images of kings and queens in the temples, in addition to the deity. The temple at Ganga-Kondakolappuram, though in a dilapidated condition, is another fine example of temple architecture under the Cholas. A large number of temples were also built at other places in South India. However, it may be well to remember that the proceeds for some of these activities were obtained from the plunder of the Vara temple, Hailbid. 1013. The Chola Empire. Population of the neighboring areas by the Chola rulers. After the fail of the Cholas, temple building activity continued under the Chalukyas of Kalyani and the Hoysalas. The district of Darwar and the Hoysala capital, Hailbid, had a large number of temples. The most magnificent of these is the Hoysaleswara temple. It is the best example of what is called the Chalukyan style. Apart from the images of gods and their art and dance, both men and women, yaksha and yakshini, the temples contain finely sculptured panels which show a busy panorama of life, including dance, music and scenes of war. And love. Thus, life was closely integrated with religion. For the common man, the temple was not merely a place for worship, but the hub of social and cultural life as well. The art of sculpture attained a high standard in South India during this period. One example of this was the giant statue of Gomataswar at Sravana-Belgola. Another aspect was image making, which reached its climax in the dancing figure of the Shiva called Nataraja. The Nataraja figures of this period, particularly those in bronze, are considered masterpieces. Many fine examples of this are to be found in museums in India and outside. The rulers of the various dynasties also patronized arts and letters during this period. While Sanskrit was regarded as the language of high culture, and a number of kings, as well as scholars and court poets wrote in it, a remarkable feature of the period was the growth of literature in the language of the areas. A number of popular saints called Nainas and Alvas, who were devotees of Shiva and Vishnu, flourished in the Tamil area between the 6th and the 9th centuries. They composed their works in Tamil and other languages of the area. The writings of these saints, which were collected into 11 volumes under 1014. 21. The name Tirumurais in the Kali part of the 12th century are considered sacred and are looked upon as the 5th Veda. The age of Kamban, who was placed in the second half of the 11th and the early part of the 12th century, is regarded as a golden age in Tamil literature. Kamban's Ramayana is considered a classic in Tamil literature. Kamban is believed to have lived at the court of the Chola king. Many others took their themes from the Ramayana and Mahabharata, thus bringing these classics nearer to the people. Though younger than Tamil, Kannada also became a literary language during this period. The Rashtrakuta, the Chayukaya and the Hoysala rulers patronized Kannada, as well as Telugu. The Rashtrakuta king, Amoghavasha, wrote a book on poetics in Kannada. Many Jain scholars also contributed to the growth of Kannada. Pampa, Ponna and Ranna are regarded as the 3 gems of Kannada poetry. Although they were under the influence of Jainism, they also wrote on themes taken from the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. Nanya, who lived at the court of a Chalukyan king, began the Telugu version of the Mahabharata. The work begun by him was completed in the 13th century by Tikana. Like the Tamil Ramayana, the Telugu Mahabharata is a classic which inspired many subsequent writers. Many folk or popular themes are also to be found in these literatures. Popular themes which were not derived from Sanskrit and which reflect popular sentiments and emotions are called desi or rural in Telugu. We can, thus, see that the period from the 8th to the 12th century was not only remarkable for political integration in South India, but also for cultural development. Trade and commerce also flourished during this period, making it one of the great periods in the history of South India. 1014. 22. Medieval exercises. 1. Explain the meaning of the following terms and concepts. Mandalam, Valanadu, Nadu, Yor, Agrahara. 2. Describe the annexationist policies of Rajaraja I and Rajendra II. 3. Discuss the relations of the Chola rulers with China. 4. Describe the main features of the South Indian temple architecture. 5. Describe the development of literature in the south from the 9th to the 12th century. 6. Who were the Nainas and Alvas and what was their contribution to South Indian languages? 7. Explain the system of government at the village level during the Chola rule. Can it be called local self-government? Substantiate your answer with arguments. 8. Describe the achievements of the Cholas in the fields of art and literature. 9. On an outline map of India mark 1. The extent of the Chola Empire. 2. Mahabalipuram, Madurai, Tanjore, Kankai, Sravanabelgola. 10. Prepare a diagram of a temple showing the main architectural features of the South Indian temples. 11. Prepare an album of pictures of temples of South India built during 9th to 12th centuries. Below each picture give the details of the temple's viz, its location, name of its builder, the possible date of its construction. 12. Read Marco Polo's account of the Chola Empire and write a note on it.